Hello and welcome to the 5th week of Season 2 on the MBC Sports Podcast. I'm Andrew Selover, your host, joined by JP Eisenhauer and Connell Scruggs for another great week on the podcast. This week, Marist takes on Flowery Branch at Flowery Branch, another big region matchup. We'll preview that one coming up. Then we'll take a look around 4A and then GHSA football. And then we'll dive into some college football before moving on to the MLB playoffs and then finally taking a little stop at the NFL. Our records on picks coming into the week, Connell and I are 25-12. We have one upset pick correct, so we're sitting at 28 points. JP 26-11, no upset picks, so you're 2 points behind us at 26 points.
It's been a deadlock for the last few weeks. I
moved up one point.
JP moved up 1 point, and I think for the last
my regular record, if you're not counting upsets, is better by one. But my upset game's been weak, but it changes this week.
Upsets are important.
Changes this week.
We'll see about that. Last week, Marist took on Denmark in what was a highly anticipated matchup. Marist came in 17-point favorites, even though Denmark is one of the best 4 teams in our region. We hadn't played a good team like Denmark all season, and Marist really fired on all cylinders in that game.
Yeah, the defense proved they're legit. The D-line had a great performance. They got pressure on Aaron McLaughlin, and we knew that the Denmark O-line was kind of weak going into this game, but they were getting constant pressure pretty much every other play or every play on him, and they even got a defensive touchdown, which is great to see. And they locked down Xavion Capers. Defense just kept him in front of him the whole night, and he had 5 receptions, I believe, on the whole night. JP, is that right?
Yeah, he had 5 receptions for 55 yards for a player averaging over 100 yards a game and averaging a touchdown a game. He was completely shut down.
Yeah, and Marist ran the ball well in the second half. In the first half, they're getting the pass going. So the offense continues to develop as the season goes on, and they're going to have to keep getting better because we play Flowery Branch this week, and then after we play Blessed Trinity, who's probably going to be the toughest game we play all season. But yeah.
Another thing, Marist completely dominated the line of scrimmage, not only offense but defense. You saw the Marist O-line really pushing around the Denmark defensive line and really just dominating that defense. And when you look at how the Marist defense played against Aaron McLaughlin, he's completed 2/3 of his passes, but he had to throw a lot in that game. Only had 139 yards, had the 1 touchdown, but lost 2 fumbles. Marist defense has really been a lockdown defense this year, and I think they're one of the best in the state.
Yeah, and we were also able to stop the outside runs. You saw Jordan Brunson, he's a Virginia Tech commit. We shut him down. They tried to run the ball outside a lot, and we shut him down with our speed on the edge and our linebacking core. Our front 7, I think, is probably the best it's been in a little bit. They're playing really well up to this point.
Yeah, that defense has been very talented. I mean, coming off a year where it was probably the best defense Marist has seen in a long time, and that's saying something because that's what this team really preaches is defense. They can't let anybody beat them on offense, and they always have to give their offense a chance. That's one of the things Coach Chablik preaches, but that front 7 is very good. I mean, last year they graduated all 4 defensive linemen. This year they replaced them with younger guys, more speed actually. Last year it was a physical, overpower you type defensive line, one of the best they've had ever. This year it's more agile. They're running around people as opposed to through them, but whichever way works, they're still getting it done, and they haven't given up too many points all year. I mean, as for the offense, it's also probably the best offense Marist has seen in a while. I mean, they're putting up points against good defenses. Maybe not the best defenses in the state yet that they've faced, but this is the most balanced offense definitely Marist has seen in a while. The air attack is more like used than Marist has ever used it before.
One thing I think you can contribute that to 2 factors. One, a second-year quarterback in Connor Skalski. He has a year of experience under his belt, and now he's really coming into his own on offense. You're seeing him be more bold, and with his deep throws, he's not taking the little check downs and trying to bullet those in. He's really making the smart throw, the right throw, and the aggressive throw. Also, play calling. You're seeing a lot more passing plays get called, and you're seeing more of a diverse Marist offense than just the triple option we've seen in years past. I think this is all leading to us, the reason why we're ranked number 1 right now. I mean, we're favorites right now from the article I read to win state over BT. So, I mean, Marist has just completely evolved from last year's team.
Yeah, you mentioned that BT, Cartersville, those teams are up there, but Marist is currently by a bunch of Georgia high school football analysts favored to win the state championship. We'll see how that develops as we close out the regular season.
Knock on wood.
This
That's not
week,
wood, Connell.
this week, Marist taking on Flowery Branch in what promises to be another big region matchup. Flowery Branch comes in 6-1, I believe, coming off a tough loss to Blessed Trinity, first loss of the season. The similar thing you saw from Denmark last week. Denmark coming in off a first loss, tough loss to Blessed Trinity. This one was even tougher loss for Flowery Branch.
Yeah, and that's because it wasn't the players' fault. They played the game they played. The coach kind of, I get wanting to be aggressive, but there's a difference between being aggressive and going for it on the 11-yard line with 4th and inches when there's 40 seconds left. Blessed Trinity, they're a great team, but the best they could do would drive it down the field and kick that field goal. So now you're tied and going into overtime, and that's, I think, the best situation you can get. And I think that's a situation you'd like to have.
Yeah, and Blessed Trinity they're not as good passing the ball this year, so it'd be tough for them to drive that ball all the way down the field and even kick a field goal. And that just makes me question Flowery Branch. Flowery Branch is a field goal kicker because if they can't trust him for like a 29-yard kick, I don't know where they can trust him.
I don't know if it wasn't trusting him.
Yeah,
I think that definitely could be part of it, but I think it's more trying, they make that, they ice the game, they get down to 1 second, call a timeout, you kick the game-winning field goal, and it's over there. But I feel like it still just was not the best decision they could have made.
Still just a huge coaching blunder, though. I mean, even if you don't trust your kicker from 29 yards, I'm still going to kick him with 43 seconds left to try to go up.
Flowery Branch, this year, if you didn't know, they lost their starting quarterback. Last year, he was a junior. He came in as a senior. He's coming to South Alabama, I believe. It's Elijah Gainey. They lost him in a preseason matchup against Decula, I believe. He tore his ACL and is out for the season. They moved to a more run-focused offense. The quarterback is a runner. Their fullback is very talented. They run the ball a ton behind a strong offensive line. So it's going to be a big matchup between the running offense of Flowery Branch and that Marist front seven.
Yeah, and this Flowery Branch team is extremely physical on both sides of the ball. They have a huge O-line, as you mentioned, and they love to run the ball, but they do a lot of play action. They mix it up a lot, and they run a lot out of the pistol, and their play action is some short crossing routes, not a lot of deep balls because they're not testing their quarterback really because he is a backup. So it's going to be huge for the Marist front seven to continue to play well this week.
Yeah, the quarterback number 12, David Renner's really been checked down Charlie so far this year. When you look at it, he's played really well against some of the worse opponents. You'd expect that. But when you look at BT last week, 2 interceptions, it's not a stat line you really need when you're playing the top teams and you want to be a top team. He is a dual threat quarterback. He has a good frame, but I think it's really the game's going to rely on Jason Ellingham, number 4, the running back. He's fast. He's powerful. He finishes runs falling forward. And by that, I mean, you're not going to be pushing him back. He's always going to get that extra couple yards. Also, one thing to watch, their quarterback does a 360 before handing the ball off, trying to get the defense to move one way and kind of do a little reverse kind of thing sometimes. And I think that's something you need to watch out for in the game. See if Marist linebackers bite on that.
And make sure to tune into this game. We'll be covering it on the NFHS network. The game starts at 7:30, but make sure to tune in at 7:10 for the pregame show, where we'll be offering keys to the game and other analysis. And after that, Phil Etheridge and Mr. Carroll will be in on the call for the game. Mr. Carroll is filling in for Jerry Novak, who has a softball game, I believe.
Yeah, the softball team has traveled to Columbus for the Elite Eight in the state championship, so good luck to them this weekend. But as you said, Mr. Carroll will be filling in on color commentary.
One more thing on Flowery Branch. It's going to be huge. Flowery Branch is a grass field. They're not turf, so this is going to be a little bit different game. You got the elements because it's supposed to rain. You get it. It's going to be muddy, and it's going to be that crowns on fields are really... they're not talked about a lot. It's that little bump you get when you're trying to have a grass field in the water, trying to get the water off the field so it doesn't just waterlog the field. It's a little bit different with different fields. Flowery Branch is one of the ones that has a very big crown, and it's very noticeable. You'll feel like you're running uphill almost.
And another thing is, this is probably the best defense that Marist has faced all season, I believe.
By far.
So it might be a defensive battle if Marist chooses to keep the ball on the ground, and Flowery Branch will most likely elect to keep the ball on the ground almost all night. So it might be a defensive battle between those offensive and defensive lines. I wouldn't be surprised if whoever wins the battle in the trenches takes this one home.
Yeah, and obviously their defensive line for both teams, offensive line for both teams, some of the best. But one player you need to look for is a middle linebacker, Connor Mayfield. He's really consistent. He's a solid football player, and he's got great football instincts. He's going to be an impact player for this game.
Yeah, and now we'll take you through the 4A Region 7 standings. Coming into this week, Marist leads the standings undefeated at 4-0. Blessed Trinity also tied for the lead, undefeated at 3-0. Following that, Flowery Branch comes in at 2-1 with a 1 loss coming to Blessed Trinity. Last week, as we mentioned, Denmark at 2-2, losing to Marist and Blessed Trinity. And then White County 1-2, 0-3 is Chastity, and 0-4 is West Hall. Those bottom 3 teams pretty much out of it. The 4A Region 7 has pretty much separated into top and bottom. We've decided who's going to make the playoffs. Now it's just a question of what they will be seeded. Marist and Blessed Trinity, the top 2 teams. If Marist can win this week, it's expected that Blessed Trinity will be able to defeat, I believe they still have to play Chastity and West Hall. They'll be expected to win both of those 2 games handily. So if Marist wins this week, it's going to be an expected showdown, Marist, Blessed Trinity, for the region title next week. We're now going to take you through the Class 4A rankings per AJC. Marist 1, Cartersville 2, Woodward 3. All teams undefeated coming into the week. At number 4, Blessed Trinity 6-1, Sandy Creek 6-1, Flowery Branch 6-1, 4, 5, and 6 right there. At 7 is Burke County, who's 7-1, followed by 7-1 Oconee County. And then in 9th is North Oconee at 8-0, followed by West Lawrence at 6-1.
I think a team that really proved their legitimacy this week is Cartersville. They beat Sandy Creek at home. T-Web had a great game, high scoring game, won 52-42. I didn't expect Cartersville to go out there and score 52 against Sandy Creek.
No, nobody did. Coming into the week, even GPB, who had that as their game of the week, live streamed it on TV. The announcers for GPB all said, we're expecting a low-scoring game, defenses to take control here in Cartersville. They expected both teams to score under 20 points, and it ended 52-42. So, absolute offensive battle there in Cartersville.
And I picked it right.
All right, JP.
Only one.
All right, we'll give you that one.
And also, another thing is Sandy Creek's definitely not out of it. However, they're going to finish second in their region, likely behind Cartersville, which means they'll take on the number 3 team from Marist region first round of the playoffs. That will be an absolute battle. First round of the playoffs, likely to be either Flowery Branch or Denmark against Sandy Creek, which will be just unbelievable matchup for the first round.
I think it's going to end up being Denmark.
You think Denmark will beat Flowery Branch? That'll be an exciting matchup.
That's going to be a really good game. I think Denmark's going to pull that one out.
It's going to be a clash of 2 styles on offense because
it's completely different.
Denmark is a spread them out, and then Flowery Branch is a pound them. So it's going to be interesting to see how the defenses hold up.
We're now going to take you into a couple of the biggest games of the week this week. Starting off in Valdosta taking on Lee County. Valdosta is the number 6th ranked team in the state. Lee County 15th. The Valdosta is 7-1 coming into the week. Lee County 6-1. I think Valdosta is going to take the win on this one just because of their experience. I think they've gotten a bunch of good games this season, and they defeated Colquitt County, I believe, this year in a 50-49 matchup. So that game gave them a bunch of experience against one of the top teams. I think they have what it takes to take down Lee County.
Yeah, I'm also going to take Valdosta. Although Lee County did win 63-7 last year in an absolute rout. But this year they lost to 3A Peach County 40-17, and they haven't really played anyone else. Peach County is a really good team in the 3A. They're probably going to win the state championship down in that classification. On the contrary, Valdosta beat number 2 Colquitt County, as you said, 50-49, and they also beat Houston County 52-20, who's also a very good team. And their only loss is to number 1 Lowndes, although it was a bad loss, 24-0. But I think that's more of a testament to Lowndes than Valdosta. So I'm going to pick Valdosta in this one. They've just played better teams so far.
Yeah, Valdosta is an incredibly complete team. I'm going to take Valdosta as well. One player to watch for, Javonte Sherman. Last week, he had 5 receptions for 188 yards and a touchdown of 96 yards and a touchdown of 65 yards in a 28-7 victory over Coffee. Their offense is explosive. I have to pick Valdosta in this one.
And guys, I forgot to mention that we have some spreads coming into this week from Maxwell ratings. Marist is a 13-point favorite against Flowery Branch. In that matchup, 24-point favorite is Valdosta, even though it's a top 20 matchup in Georgia. Next matchup, number 1 Lowndes taking on number 18 Camden County. Lowndes is undefeated, taking on the 1-loss Camden County. Lowndes just has absolutely destroyed everybody they've laid their hands on this year. I mean, they've faced some of the top teams in Georgia, and they've still absolutely blown them out. I think it'll be the same story this week. I think Lowndes wins big.
Yeah, I'm also going to take Lowndes. They're an extremely strong team, ranked number 6 nationally by Max Preps. They beat number 11 in Georgia, Parkview, 38-7 earlier in the season, and number 6 Valdosta, as we were just saying, 24-0 earlier. They've played great teams so far, and they've proved themselves. They're playing fantastic, 8-0. Last year, Lowndes won in this matchup 28-27 in a nail-biter. And Camden County is coming off a rough game last week. They played number 2 Colquitt County, and they lost 34-17. Their starting quarterback, Logan Watson, struggled last week. He went 2 for 8 and had to be taken out for a sophomore who actually played pretty well. So Lowndes is just coming into this one with momentum. I think they're going to win it.
Yeah, I think Lowndes is going to win this one as well. When you look at what they did last week, they held Tiff County to 93 yards rushing and the quarterback to 3 of 13 for 25 yards and 2 interceptions. I think Lowndes is the better team in this matchup, especially when you look at Camden. They were with Colquitt County for the most of that game, but entering the fourth quarter, which is the most important quarter, they just completely blew it, and they were dominated in that quarter. I don't think that Camden County can beat Lowndes.
Yeah, and another matchup we're gonna look at. It's not in Georgia actually, but it's the number one ranked team in the nation in Mater Dei taking on the number 2 ranked team in the nation in St. John Bosco. Both teams are 8-0 coming to this one. A bunch of the analysts have said this one's pretty much a toss-up. Connell, what do you have on this one?
I am gonna take Mater Dei, although I'm gonna agree it's a toss-up. It's pretty much 50-50. Tickets for this game sold out in less than 24 hours. Some resale tickets going for over $200 on Craigslist for a high school game. Both these teams are extremely high-powered. Mater Dei has won every game by at least 16 points, and they're winning by an average margin of 40 points per game. And St. John Bosco has won every game except for one by double digits, and that one game was against another nationally ranked opponent. Here's a crazy stat. There will be 49 players on the field that are either at least a 3-star recruit or have an FBS offer. So this is going to be, I mean, it's unbelievable how many recruits are going to be on this field for this game. And the top 2 ranked QBs in the nation are going to play each other. The number 1 ranked QB for St. John Bosco is Clemson commit DJ Uyagalele. He's the number 1 pro-style QB, obviously going to Clemson next year, class of 2020. And then the Mater Dei quarterback, Alabama commit Bryce Young. He's the number 1 dual-threat quarterback in the nation and number 2 overall in both class of 2020. So it's just going to be a high-powered matchup in this one. It's a toss-up.
I actually like Uyagalele to take this one for St. John Bosco, the Clemson commit. Big fan of him. I think that the experience that St. John Bosco has gotten this year, I mean, they've played some closer matchups than Mater Dei has. That you mentioned the top team and one of the top nation-ranked teams. They played Servite, who's the number 31 team in the nation. They beat them narrowly. I think that was a 3-point game. I think that just gives them experience in close games. A lot of these nationally ranked teams, they don't play anybody near their level, so they don't get experience in close games. I think that experience in a close game will help Bosco. I think they take this one, but in a close one.
It's going to be a battle of the top 2 quarterbacks in the nation. These players are incredible, and these teams are incredible. It's really a toss-up, as we've said this entire time. You got the Clemson commit, DJ Uyagalele, for St. John Bosco, and then Alabama commit, Bryce Young. When you look at Bryce Young, he had 5 touchdowns last week. He has 38 on the season. That's averaging 7.25 touchdowns per game. Mater Dei coming off a big win, 45-0 over Santa Margarita. I'm going to have to take Mater Dei in this one.
JP, you like saying that QB's name.
I love saying the QB's name,
Uiagalelei.
especially because I know how to pronounce it now.
As we move into some college football Week 7 recap, last week, the stunner of the week was Wisconsin losing in Champaign, Illinois to the Fighting Illini. They were partying hard after that one, I can guarantee you. That was just a stunner.
Yeah, when you look at Wisconsin, I don't know what they were doing in that game. Jonathan Taylor, the one bright spot, he became the fastest player to get to 5,000 career rushing yards in college, but he had a costly fumble there at the end. Wisconsin's offense in general was turning the ball over. Jack Cohen had uncharacteristic interceptions. He's been a great decision maker all season. And this game, the first touchdown allowed by Wisconsin in the first half all season, they did not live up to the hype. They were supposed to be able to make a push for the top 4, and after this loss, it's a big question. They're still going to, obviously, in the top 10 with their defense. They were averaging giving up 4 to 5 points per game, but they're just not doing that well. They were in the last game.
And this one, I guess it doesn't really affect the playoff picture as long as Ohio State defeats Wisconsin. If Ohio State can get done what they expect to get done in the Big Ten, then it really doesn't affect the playoff picture. But Wisconsin could come back and ruin Ohio State's season.
Yeah, it doesn't affect it. Wisconsin was going to have to win out anyway, and I think this loss doesn't really affect them because if they win out the rest of their games, they're in the playoff, in my opinion. So it really doesn't affect the total playoff picture.
Yeah, as we move into Michigan versus Penn State, it got close towards the end over in up at Penn State, Death Valley. The whiteout looked absolutely stunning, but Michigan fails to win another top 10 matchup game against top 10 teams. Harbaugh is 1-10, I think.
1-7.
1-7. And he hasn't beaten Ohio State. Will he get fired by the end of the year?
I'm gonna say at the end of the season, if he loses a game he's supposed to win this year, like an unranked team or a game where they're favored by a lot, I think he's gone because, as you said, he's 1-7 against top 10 teams in his tenure. He hasn't beaten Ohio State, which is their rival. If you bring a coach in and he can't beat that rival, you often see they get fired. And their remaining if you look at their remaining schedule, they have Notre Dame this week, which I think Notre Dame's going to win that one. Ohio State later in the season, and I think they're going to get blown out in that one. And they have the potential to be so if you look at that, they have the potential to be a 4-loss team this year. And I don't think the Michigan front office is going to look at that and they're going to be happy with it. So I think he will be gone by this year if he doesn't execute against one of those 2 top 10 teams.
Yeah, Harbaugh is definitely on the hot seat. He's a great coach, but he just can't get it done against these ranked teams, and that's just been a problem for him, and he needs to figure that out, and he needs to figure it out soon because he needs to win this week if he wants to keep his job. I think he needs to win this week and then at least be competitive against Ohio State. You cannot go into the end of the season being a 4-loss team with all the talent they have on Michigan. I think that they could easily lose this one. Harbaugh could easily lose his job.
And now we're going to take our top 5 that we think rankings-wise coming in to this week. There's been a bunch of debates over at ESPN, all the sports networks, as to who deserves to be top 5.
Well, I got the right one.
Connell, you want to start off?
I'll start it. At number 5, I have Clemson. They haven't played anyone all year, and they almost lost to UNC, but I still think they're going to make it to the playoff because of their strength of schedule or lack thereof. They don't really play anyone. I think they're going to win every single game, and as the committee, you can't leave Clemson out as the champions last year and as an undefeated ACC champion. So I think they're going to make the playoff, but they're ranked number 5 for me. 4, I got Oklahoma. They've played fantastic up to this point. Their defense is improving as the weeks go on, much improved from last season. And their offense, obviously, Jalen Hurts, he's a Heisman contender. They've been doing the things that they always do over at Oklahoma, which is play great on offense. The reason I have them ranked higher than Clemson is they've actually played somebody. They beat Texas, although in a close game, and they're going to have to play Texas again, in my opinion, I think, later in the season to win the Big 12. 3, I have Ohio State. They're perhaps the best all-around team in college football. Their defense is better than Oklahoma's, in my opinion, and their offense too. But they really haven't played anyone yet either. They play some teams in the future. They're going to play Michigan, and they have the chance to prove themselves in that way. At number 2, I have LSU. This is a toss-up between the number 1 team. LSU and Alabama, in my opinion, are interchangeable here. LSU's played better teams and they've defeated better teams, but I think at number 1, I'm going to put Alabama because I think they have the better team overall. They have a better defense than LSU. Only thing that concerns me about Alabama's defense is their linebacking. They have 2 freshman linebackers. Their defensive line's starting to come into play with Terrell Lewis. He's playing fantastic there on the edge. And their secondary is extremely experienced. They have Shyheim Carter. He's a senior. Xavier McKinney at safety. And they also have Trayvon Diggs. They've played fantastic so far. So, yes, I have Alabama at 1.
I think I'm going to have to start off at 5 with Clemson. Clemson's been a great team, but when you look at the big question mark, Trevor Lawrence, he's had too many turnovers this year for me to be comfortable putting them in the top 4. And their defense, though, is what keeps them in the top 5. Their defense is actually has better stats than last year's defense, which was an incredible defense. Next, at number 4, I'm dropping Ohio State to 4. Dobbins and Fields have been incredible, but my big question is that offensive line for Ohio State and that defensive line for Ohio State. I don't like them in the trenches as much as I have in the past. It's definitely a weaker point on their team, which is why at number 3, I put Oklahoma ahead of them. Jalen Hurts is playing out of his mind this season, and the defense is extremely improved from last year, where they were one of the worst defenses in the league. They're one of the top defenses this year on third down. And to a couple players to watch, CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb's had an incredible season. He's a major reason for bumping them up to 3. They have 3 5-star true freshmen who have had a lot of productivity, especially Hazelwood. Rambo having a real breakout season as well. At number 2, I have Alabama. I'm bumping Alabama down to number 2. Obviously, we know Tua Tagovailoa. They have weapons everywhere. This defense is good, but still a few questions, especially as Connell mentioned at the linebacker position. I think that strength of schedule is a big reason for me bumping them down to number 2. I have to put LSU at number 1. They've had a much harder schedule so far, and with Joe Burrow being a real dual threat quarterback, this offense is going. Their run game is extremely effective. Their defense might not be the best, but they're opportunistic and they're improving. You look at Delpit, you look at Divinity Jr., they definitely have playmakers on this defense to make a push.
Yeah, as for mine, I changed it up a little bit. I took Clemson at 5, similar to y'all, and Oklahoma at 4. I think both of those teams still have a little bit to prove. Clemson more than Oklahoma, definitely. Oklahoma proved some things against Texas, but they still have some things to prove. They need to close out the season well, convincingly, probably win out to get into the playoff. At number 3, I put Bama. I think Bama has a bunch of question marks on that defense, as both of y'all mentioned. They need to sharpen up if they want to win against some of the top teams, especially that LSU game. That defense needs to sharpen up a bit to win that game. At 2, I have LSU. LSU is similar to Bama in that both offenses are very high-powered, but the defenses both need a little bit of work. This LSU defense is one of the worst I think we've seen in a while. LSU is usually one of the best defenses in the country, but this year it's a bit of a drop-off, but they pick up all the slack in the offense, and definitely more than that. Probably the best offense LSU has had in a while. And at number 1, I put the Ohio State Buckeyes. I think Ohio State has looked like potentially the most complete team throughout this season so far. I know they haven't faced too many good teams, but the Big Ten, every week's a challenge. Big Ten and SEC are the most well-rounded conferences. I think it'll be interesting to see how Ohio State compares to those SEC teams, but for now, I think that offense has played well, and they haven't struggled against anybody that they shouldn't be struggling against. Alabama, I mean, they should have beaten Tennessee by more, and then LSU against Florida, it was a very tight matchup. They looked good, but they looked beatable. Because that Florida team, they were banged up on defense. If that was a healthy Florida defense, I think that game would have been extremely close. And another team to watch for me is the Oregon team that comes off a win last week at Washington. They played well at Washington, pulled out a close one. It's a team that's figured out how to win close games. They lost first week against Auburn in a tight one, but since then they've run through that Pac-12, defeating Cal, defeating Washington. They got another big matchup against Washington State this week. We'll see. But I think if they finish the year strong, win the Pac-12 championship, they got a chance to get in, especially given that their loss comes first week of the season to a top 10 SEC team, and the committee, they reward teams that lose early instead of late.
Watch out for Penn State, though. They're a team that can make some noise in this top 4.
Yep, they are. They got a top 5 offense and defense, and they have the chance to knock off Ohio State if they want to, because they play them later in the season. So if they win that, I think Ohio State's out. Ohio State's out just because of the weakness of their strength of schedule.
Let's take a few picks for this week. First up, Notre Dame at Michigan in the Big House. It's a raucous environment up there. Number 8 Notre Dame, though, as we said earlier, 1-7 for Harbaugh against top 10 teams. Can he break through this week? I think not. I think Notre Dame wins.
I also have Notre Dame in this one. Jim Harbaugh continues to struggle against top 10 teams. I see no reason why this is going to change this week. Only advantage that Michigan has is they're in the Big House, and they did win a game against Iowa in the Big House. That helped them win, I think, because it's the biggest stadium in college football, and it's loud up there.
Yeah, and I'm also going to have to take Notre Dame. Their defense has played great all season, especially the top safety in the league. I mean, you can't say there's someone better right now than Alohi Gilman. He's playing incredible. Even with Komet out, they still have Chase Claypool at the receiver position, and Michigan's struggle versus ranked teams has been a very noted in this podcast so far. So I'm going to take Notre Dame in this one.
Probably the biggest matchup of the week, top 10 matchup between the number 9 Auburn Tigers, the number 2 LSU Tigers at Death Valley. I think another game where the environment could be big. Connell, who are you taking?
I'm going to take number 2 LSU. This one's in Death Valley, and we know what Death Valley is like. It's one of the top 5 craziest environments in college football. And Bo Nix hasn't proven himself to play well in big games. Struggled against Oregon, went 13 for 31. Only good drive for him was really the last one. Played horrible against Florida. He was consistently making bad reads, and that Florida secondary is good. But the thing is for LSU is that defense isn't as good as Florida's, so I think he will have more success than he did against Florida, but they're not going to be able to keep up with the LSU offense. That offense is unprecedented. Joe Burrow is on a tear like no one has seen before. He's improved so much from last season. It's kind of crazy. So I'm going to take LSU in this one by a couple touchdowns.
I have to take my number 1 team in this one. I say LSU wins this in Death Valley against a true freshman quarterback. He has not experienced this kind of noise yet this year, and it's going to be a big test for him. I don't think he can pass this test. I think LSU is going to win this one. Burrow in that offense has been electric. You saw what they did against Florida, who's an incredible defense, and you know Florida played real well against Auburn. And you look at the running back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's just played incredible all season, and he tore Florida apart. I think LSU wins this one pretty easily.
I'm going to take the upset in this one. I'm going to take Auburn.
You're wrong.
I think LSU, they've gotten so hyped over the past couple of weeks as being the best LSU team we've seen in a decade, and all that hype I think might get to their head a little bit. I think LSU has consistently over the past decade, they've come into big games and they've struggled a little bit. I think Auburn might be the best defense they've faced all year. I know they faced Florida, but they faced a banged-up Florida defense. This Auburn defense might be able to hold them to, 30 points, 28 points.
I don't know about that.
And then I think Bo Nix, he could have I think he could have a big game. He had a big game
in Death Valley.
He had a big game against Texas A&M, but he's facing one of the not as good defenses in the SEC. There's a bunch of lower ranked teams that have better defenses than LSU. I think Auburn can put up some points, and I think they're going to win.
I think you said LSU's hype. They got a reason for it. They beat number 15 Texas 45-38 earlier in the season, and then we just talked about it. They beat Florida 42-28, and they put up 42 against Florida's defense. I mean, you said it was banged up, but it was really just the defensive line. That secondary is still great, and they still put 42 up against them.
I think that Auburn defensive line is far better than that Florida defensive line is in that game. I think they can get some pressure on Burrow, force him out of the pocket a little bit, and as you said, I think they deserve the hype, but I think it might get into their heads a little bit. We'll see this weekend in the big game.
LSU by 2 touchdowns.
LSU by 3 touchdowns.
3, that's a little bit much. That's a little bit much.
I think 17-point win for LSU.
I'm going to go 2 touchdowns.
Who's your upset pick this week, Connell?
I have Oklahoma State over Iowa State. The Big 12 has been where the upset picks have been this year. And there really isn't many other games that are feasible for an upset pick. So I think Oklahoma State, they have a chance to make some noise against Iowa State, who's played very well this season so far.
You want to hear another game feasible for an upset pick? Wisconsin's going to win this week. I think Wisconsin is going to go in and beat Ohio State. They're coming off a really bad loss to Illinois, so you know they're going to be motivated. This is one of the best defenses in the league. And you look, they have Jonathan Taylor, who just became the fastest player to reach 5,000 yards in college football history. They have such a complete team. I think that they're going to put up a fight against Ohio State, and not just that, they're going to win this game.
JP, one of the best defenses in the Big 12, give up 24 to Illinois.
No, the offense was turning it over. They were getting short fields.
I'm going to take Kentucky over JP's Missouri team.
Oh, my goodness.
Kentucky looked very good through 2.5 quarters last week at Georgia. Georgia was coming off that loss to South Carolina, and we expected a bounce back, but Kentucky gave them for a run for their money through 2.5 quarters and forced Georgia to get booed off the field at halftime. You don't see that much in Athens. I think Missouri, I watched that Missouri-Vandy game last week. Missouri looked absolutely horrible. Vanderbilt, who I don't think has won an SEC game yet, just took over that game and won. JP, don't tell me it was because of the refs. The refs made one bad call.
I'm a player. I don't like refs.
Didn't cost them the game. Missouri's going to struggle again this week, and Kentucky takes it over the
I think
Mizzou.
Kentucky did not really give Georgia a game. It was because of the weather that Georgia was having offensive struggles. They didn't put a point up on the board, and when the weather actually cleared up, Georgia put 21 points up that half, so I don't know about Kentucky giving them a game.
Mizzou has 5 defensive touchdowns this year. Their offense has been electric other than last game. I think that they can win by 24, maybe 31 in this game. I really do not think Kentucky is a good team. I think that Kentucky's going to get dominated in this game when they don't have the rain to help them.
Hey, don't forget, Kentucky did give Florida a run for their money, too. Kentucky
That's when
almost
Florida's
won that
quarterback
one.
got injured, though, and that was Felipe Franks.
Felipe is worse than Kyle Trask.
Felipe is up and down.
We can debate that topic later.
We'll move on to some MLB playoffs. Currently, the World Series going on. Astros down 2-0. Nobody saw this coming with Garrett Cole and Justin Verlander taking the mound in the first 2 games. But I still have faith in the Astros. I think Greinke will come up big like he hasn't so far this postseason. I think he's feeling the pressure. He's going to come up big for his team, get a win tomorrow night in Game 3, and then I think they're going to hand it back over to the veterans who will come back strong, win 2 games for them. And I think Astros take it in 7.
Man,
you're so wrong.
Nationals coming out and winning 2 games in Houston. Man, I couldn't have predicted that. Juan Soto has looked fantastic so far in the series, and they lit up arguably the best pitcher in baseball, Garrett Cole, in the first game, which no one expected that. And then they come back. I thought after they lit him up that game, I was like, okay, they just came out hot. Astros weren't really ready for that one. Verlander's going to come and win this next game. They come and light up Verlander, and I'm like, oh man, that's after sweeping the Cardinals. I think they just continue to carry their momentum, and they're going back to DC. So I think they're going to win at least. I think they're going to win in DC. I think I'm going to say Nationals in 5. That's bold, but I think Astros will take 1. I'm going to say Nationals in 5. They're going to continue their hot momentum they have so far and finish it out.
You want to know what's bolder though? Nationals in 4. Nationals are going to sweep this series. If you watch the same game that I did yesterday, 12-3. That's complete domination. They won the first game 5-4, and this is at Houston.
JP, 12-3 because it should have been 3-2 after the 7th inning. An error cost them those runs, and then they just put in their worst bullpen pitchers they have on the roster so that they could save their pitcher.
So you can't get out of the inning. You're still. I mean, that 9 runs is 9 runs.
In the 7th and 8th inning, 9 runs after 5 scoreless innings and 2 in the first.
Yeah, and I mean, an error is a part of baseball, so you gotta. It's part of the game, and believe it or not, they scored 12, whether error or not. So I think it's just crazy how much momentum they have right now.
Yeah, it is insane. The fact that they should have lost in the play-in game in the wild card to the Brewers, and now they're 2 games away from winning the World Series. JP, a few notes on the NFL before we sign off for the week?
There's no way nobody has heard about Patrick Mahomes' injury. Everyone here who's listening to this has heard of Patrick Mahomes being injured. I've heard conflicting reports. One said he's back at practice, doubtful for this week. So one said he's going to be out 3 weeks. Another said 4 to 6. I'm guessing he's out, I'm going to say 3 games and then comes back for the 4th game. They're going to lose to the Packers and Vikings because he's not going to be there. And I think when you're playing the Titans, you really don't need to be playing Patrick Mahomes versus the Titans right now with Ryan Tannehill or Marcus Mariota or whoever they decide to start that week. I think you let Matt Moore or Chad Henne or Kyle Shermer got pulled up from the practice squad, whoever you're going to let play that game and continue.
When is the Patriots game in their schedule?
Patriots game is 6. So if he's out for the full 6 weeks like CBS Sports.
I think they'll put him in for that game because that's...
he's going to be in for that.
There's no way a guy comes back to practice this week and misses 6 games.
That's why I'm saying it's a dumb decision. It's a dumb decision to have him back in practice.
He was really limited in practice.
They want him back for this weekend.
He's not playing this weekend.
Coach hasn't ruled him out for this weekend.
He will not
play. Playing this week.
He's not playing for the next 3 weeks.
He dislocated his knee.
If they
his
lose,
kneecap. Ligaments are injured.
If they lose this weekend, though, against the Packers, next week's game against the Vikings will be crucial. I think we might see Pat Mahomes back as early as next week.
If they have the, I don't even know where to start with you, Celo, because that was just no. He's not returning in 2 weeks. There's the possibility that he's going to need surgery after the season. So there's no way that he can even have a chance this week. The coach is not ruling him out because he's trying to give that smoke and mirrors kind of look towards the Vikings next week. There's no way he plays in the next 2 games. I think he's not going to play in the next 3 games. And their quarterbacks are not that good. They're going to lose these games that Patrick Mahomes is not going to be in, other than, of course, against the Titans. This is a ligament injury. And not only that, you look at Patrick Mahomes for the rest of the season. I mean, 2 ankle injuries and a knee injury. If you want to talk about mobility being a problem, it's going to destroy him.
We'll see in the coming weeks what will happen with Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs. If they lose the next 2 games, that could be big in their winning the division hopes, but we'll see.
I just want to say, the Madden curse is real.
It is.
The Madden curse is real.
It's been real for the past few years.
It's
especially
real.
AB. That's probably been the worst one.
Antonio Brown, there was Tom Brady losing the Super Bowl to the Eagles. Now there's Patrick Mahomes. He's had 3 injuries already this season.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll do for this week on the MBC Sports podcast, Week 5, Season 2. Thanks to Connell, Scruggs, JP Eisenhauer for joining me as always. As we said, be sure to tune in tomorrow night to catch the Marist War Eagles back in action on the NFHS network. Pre-game with Connell, JP, and I starting at 7:10 for some more in-depth analysis, with the game starting at 7:30 on the call. Phil Etheridge and Coach Carroll. So be sure to tune into that one, Marist Flowery branch. Signing off for today, I'm Andrew Selover. Hopefully we'll see you tuning in tomorrow night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.